Today we're talking all about fall knitting plans. Hello and welcome to New Moon Knitting. My name is Hillary. You can find me over on Ravelry and Instagram at New Moon Knitting. And today I'm going to talk all about my plans for fall knitting this year. So it is already the end of August, which means that it is almost time to start fall knitting. I think like a lot of knitters, fall knitting is some of my favorite knitting that I do all year. I think the weather is such that it's cool but not cold, so you can really play around with different layering pieces and textures and really make the most of woolen garments. You don't need heavy coats, so you can just leave the house in a nice sweater. And yeah, it's just, there's so many fun outdoor fall activities that you can do. And having a lovely hand knit piece is such a nice way to emphasize that whole experience. So with fall fast approaching, I decided to spend some time figuring out what I wanted to knit this fall. A couple of parameters I put together for myself to make sure that I kind of have an idea of how much time I have to knit this fall, even though the actual fall season doesn't start until closer to the end of September, so usually around the 20th or the 21st, and goes through the middle to end of December. I have decided to consider my fall knitting season September 1st to November 30th. I think what that does is it starts me knitting wool objects when at least the temperatures have started to drop a little bit where I live. It's still very warm in early September, but it's not hot, and so I can get away with, particularly in the mornings and evenings, knitting on wool without it feeling really sticky and heavy in my hands. I also think starting at the beginning of September, it gives me a couple of weeks before the days really start to cool off to get a head start on some garments, so that when it does finally get to that lovely fall weather, I actually have some pieces that are almost ready to wear that I can go ahead and just throw on immediately that first cold morning. So the first thing I did after I kind of established what I thought that knitting season was going to look like, those 3 full months, I started thinking about what I wanted my inspiration to be for my fall knitting this year. And I thought I did a couple of things. The first thing I did was I looked at my wardrobe and I tried to determine where there were some gaps in the pieces that I have that I would like to fill. So after I did that and kind of got a sense of the types of garments and accessories that I would like to make, the next thing I did was I looked at my stash. I am making a real conscious effort this year to try to use up as much as my stash as I can. And so I wanted to continue that goal into the fall. So after I looked at my wardrobe, I looked at my stash and I tried to figure out what made sense to use in terms of yarn weights and in terms of sort of the garments I was thinking of making. So with those 2 points in mind, what I ended up doing was I created a mood board of kind of a color palette I'd like to work with this fall. I realized when I was looking at my wardrobe, I could really use some nice warmer neutrals. So I took a lot of inspiration from kind of end of harvest colors, I guess I would call them. So things like, like wheat fields, that kind of browny beigey color palette, corn stalks at the end after the harvest, hay bales, this like soft brown neutral palette, instead of kind of those more traditional autumn colors like, oranges and reds and those really like warm, saturated colors. And the last thing I'm considering, I'm not really going to cover in terms of patterns in this video, but I am thinking about gift knits. And so I didn't want to overwhelm myself with too many personal knitting items this fall. If I'm counting November 30th as the last day of fall knitting, that would really only give me like 26 days until Christmas. And if I want to make some nice things for folks, I don't think that will give me enough time, especially if I want to start working on any winter sweaters for myself as well. So, with all of that in mind, I came up with 5 items that I would like to knit this fall. Number 1 is a textured sweater. Number 2, an oversized cardigan. Number 3, a lightweight shawl or wrap. Number 4, a ready for winter hat. And number 5 is a nice pair of cozy socks. So I found a couple of patterns that were inspiring to me in each of these categories. And so what I'll do is I'll walk through those inspiration patterns first. And then after that, I will actually explain what my final plan is for the fall and what yarns and things I'm going to be using for that. The first category is textured sweaters. I think that a texture, all over texture on a sweater for the fall is really lovely because it adds a lot of visual interest without kind of being too heavy. Like I think sometimes a cable, all over cable can be a little bulky for the fall season, at least where I live. So I really love some kind of texture, some sort of visual interest in a fall sweater. And so I found 4 patterns that I thought were very interesting. The first is the Alvar sweater by Sari Nordlund. This is a top-down sweater. It's got a really nice boxy shape to it and drop sleeves. The pattern is knit using different Gansey sweater motifs. So it's got stripes of alternating textured areas that are all made using knits and pearls. I think it's really lovely, just those different kind of color or those different textures that show up throughout the piece and how they alternate. And I think the shape looks really cozy for the fall. The pattern recommends knitting it with Le Chatquet Tricot yarn, which is a DK weight blend of, I believe, merino and yak and silk. So yeah, really lovely pattern, really lovely motifs, and I think it would be a great addition to a fall sweater collection. The next sweater on my list is the Heather sweater by Anya Arends. This is another drop shoulder, top down sweater. But rather than kind of having these alternating patterns, it just has an all over stitch pattern motif that's just again created with knits and pearls. I think it's a really lovely design. It kind of reminds me of like waffle tees. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but yeah, that sort of waffly kind of pattern. It looks really nice and warm for like a cool fall morning. The designer in the pattern, the sample knit is also in this lovely, burnt orange color, which is such a nice fall color. And so, yeah, it just seems like a really nice piece to wear when it's cold outside. The pattern is knit with a DK and a merino held together. The pattern recommends La Mana Como, which is merino, and I believe La Mana Premia, which is the silk mohair. The third sweater I want to talk about is the Loonfeld sweater by Lona Kildsen. Apologies to my really poor pronunciation. But this is also a top-down sweater. This is I believe, a top-down raglan sweater. It's knit using 2 different ribbing motifs. So the cuffs and the hemline at the bottom are knit with what looks like a regular kind of 1x1 rib, and then the body of the sweater is knit with what looks to me like maybe like a 3x1, but rather than having the knit side be the predominant outer side like you would see in a lot of knitting, the pearls are actually on the outside. So what you end up with is of several pearl stitches joined together with a single strand of a single knit rib. line. So yeah, I think it creates like again, this really lovely texture. I think it's a really nice way to highlight a pearl stitch and create this kind of alternative to some of the ribbing more used to seeing in patterns. It also has this really lovely funnel neck design characteristic, which again, I think a funnel neck is a really nice cozy neckline without kind of having the bulk of a folded over turtleneck collar that you might see in more wintry design patterns. And the last sweater I'm looking at is Chinook Winds by SD Wongo. This is a bottom up sweater that has this all over lace motif in kind of a chevron design. It also has some baubles attached to it as well. And it has this really cool design element, which is like this little fringe that it includes as well. I think sometimes lace can look a little more summery. I think lace is a really great technique for summer knits. But I think adding these baubles and this fringe gives this sweater a real more kind of like transitional fall piece feel to me. This was originally published in Pom Pom magazine in their autumn issue last fall. And I remember seeing it when it was released, and I just thought it was such a cool and unique sweater. There was so many kind of unique design elements to it, and I have been thinking about knitting it since then. So I may go ahead and knit it this fall. I know it's a little different than kind of like a true texture because it is a lace, but I think that fringe and those baubles really create this really unique texture to the piece, and I would really love to knit it. So the next category that I have in my list is oversized cardigans. I think, you know, when it finally starts to cool off, especially in the mornings, it's so nice to have like a big cardigan that you can just like throw on to warm up after you get out of bed and stuff. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to have a piece like that. I don't really have an oversized cardigan in my knitting wardrobe right now. I have a couple of like more fitted pieces. And so, yeah, I would love something just a little bit bigger and cozier to wear as the mornings and evenings start to cool off here. So I have 3 patterns in this category. The first is the Champagne Cardigan by Petite Knit. This is a top-down raglan cardigan with a V-neck. It has these really nice thick cuffs and bottom band to them. It looks like it's a couple of inches. I think that's a really nice detail on this piece. I also really like the sort of classic look of the button band. It's a really nice and clean look and just like a really classic oversized cardigan piece. It is worsted weight. It is a DK and a mohair held together. The pattern recommends Sadness Garn Tin Silk Mohair and Sadness Garn Double Sunday. So yeah, it's just a really classic, lovely piece. Very similar to the Champagne Cardigan is the Frankie Cardigan by Sadness Garn. It is so similar, it actually uses the exact same yarns from Sadness Garn. And really the kind of the biggest difference I noticed in terms of the pattern, and this is a feature of it I really like, is the sleeves seem to be a little bit more oversized. So they just seem to be, they fall a little bit longer on the model and they seem to be a little bit wider than the Champagne Cardigan. Also, I believe the Champagne Cardigan is knit with 4 buttons and the Frankie Cardigan is knit with 3. So it's probably a little bit more of a cropped design. So that's just a slightly different kind of silhouette that you'll get out of that. But again, they're very similar, and which is probably why they both ended up on the list, because this is just kind of a look I'm really feeling this fall and I would really like to knit. And the last cardigan is is pretty different from the other two. It is the Ribbed Raglan by Ann Vetzel. This is a bottom-up raglan. It looks to me to be knitted in a like a garter stitch rib, so where you knit every other row and then you do the ribbing in the alternate row. So that creates this, again, a really lovely texture, kind of like some of the sweaters I was looking at to this piece. It also has some other really interesting finishes. It has a rolled kind of top to the collar, which is really nice, and it is sort of buttons straight from the top of the collar to the bottom. So that creates a very different silhouette than kind of like a V-neck cardigan that I was looking at. This pattern is knit with a fingering weight mohair and a fingering weight wool held together. The pattern recommends Filcolana Tila and Filcolana Saga. So that would probably create something around a DK weight raglan sweater when all is said and done. The next category is wraps. I have a couple of like winter scarves, but I don't really have any kind of like wraps or shawls or anything like that. Something to kind of just create like a little bit of an extra layer if you're outside and it gets a little cold, or, you know, sometimes if you work in an office, that the temperature control could be a little less than ideal in the fall. And so just having something I can keep at my desk to throw around when it gets a little chilly before they correctly kind of calibrate the AC. That's something that I'm looking for. So I have found 3 patterns that I like that I'm thinking about knitting this fall. The first wrap is Selvage by Julia Wilkins. This is a really unique 6-color shawl that is knit in such a way it actually looks like a woven fabric. From the pattern, it says, "The tartan effect of this shawl is accomplished by a combination of seed stitch, intarsia, and working each right side and wrong side row twice by sliding the stitches back to the other end of the circular needle." So I've just never really seen anything like this before, and so I think it would be like a really interesting challenge. I'm not sure if I'll do it this year just because, like I said, I'm trying to use my stash and I don't know if I have 6 different colors of fingering weight in my stash right now that would look really good in this piece. And if I was going to do this, I would want to make sure that I had a really good color palette. I think the color palette in the pictures is really lovely. I know it uses Knitting for Olive Merino. But yeah, I was really fascinated kind of by the look and the feel of this piece. So again, that's Selvage by Julia Wilkins. The next pattern I've been looking at is Clint by Natasha Hornsby. This is a crescent shaped shawl, and it has this really lovely quilt motif on the back. That quilt motif is made using modular knitting. I know that quilt patterns and quilt motifs have been kind of popular in some patterns for the last, I'm sure much longer, but I can think of some patterns that were released in the last year that have had this quilt motif. I think there was Andrea Mowry's Rhinebeck sweater this year. Her fall sweater release has kind of this quilty vibe to it. So I think this is another cool way to kind of incorporate quilt motif. This pattern is knitted using Isire yarn Maryland, I believe. Apologies again. But that is a sport weight yarn, and it is a wool and linen and flax blend. So again, that is Clint by Natasha Hornsby. And the last shawl or wrap that I've been looking at is the Knit As You Are wrap by Sweater Freak. This is a really cool mosaic knit wrap. Again, I think I'm just kind of in my chevron phase. I'm a millennial. I can't help it. But it does have this like very broad chevron pattern to it and this abstract design to the chevrons. So I really like that bright, bold pattern to it. This is knit using Miss Bab's Yummy 2-ply, which is a 100% merino fingering weight wool. And yeah, I think it would just be a lovely addition to a fall wardrobe. So the next category I have is a pair of cozy socks. I think that the fall is like such a nice time to start getting into some more sock knitting after a summer of like mostly like sandal wearing and like hot feet. It's really nice to get to temperatures where you can start wearing really cozy socks again. So looking forward to that. The first pattern I'm thinking about knitting this fall is the Wild Wool Socks by Jen Joyce Designs. These are a cuff down sock with a couple of different color work motifs to them. I think they look like really lovely, sturdy hiking socks. They just have some really lovely design elements to them. And when, in the fall, I absolutely love hiking. And so I think these would be kind of like a great addition to my wardrobe because they're very practical, but also like very interesting. The pattern recommends using a Cascade Heritage sock, which I believe is a 75-25 sock yarn. And that's it. And the final pair of socks that I've been looking at are The Back of the Beyond by Natalie Sheldon. These are another cuff down sock pattern, but they have a really lovely and very detailed color work motif throughout that's, very reminiscent of hiking and camping and the woods. And they've just got like so much going on in them. One thing I think is really interesting reading through this pattern is you create the different sizes by changing your needle size rather than sort of like a different stitch number for the different sizes. So I've never really used a pattern like that. And so if I was going to do this, I would want to make sure that I was happy kind of with the texture of the yarn in order to get the gauge for the size that I would need. But I cannot discount how cute these are. This pattern, these little socks, I love them, and I would want to show them off wherever I went if I made them. And the yarn recommended for this is Raven Ritual Dyes, which is a 100% Rambouillet light fingering. The last category I have for today is hats. So I have two hats that I'm looking at for the fall. Again, it's probably, I won't get a lot of wear out of a hat in the fall here. But if I'm counting end of November, there's probably a couple of weeks near the end of that season where it gets cool enough that like if I'm walking the dog in the morning, or if I'm going to be outside for a little bit, it will be nice to have a hat. And then of course I'll get plenty of use out of it once the temperatures drop a bit more in the winter. The first hat is the Weekend Hat by Hiromi Nagasawa. This is a all over cable hat, but I think the cable pattern is really cool. Again, it's got like a little bit of like chevron look to it. But I think the cables are like a little more subtle than cables can be sometimes in hats, which I think is really cool. It also has some ribbing on either side of the cables, which creates kind of a more unique shape to the hat, I think. The pattern recommends using either DK held single or fingering and a mohair held together, and it comes with it comes with instructions for two different brim lengths. So you can make kind of a straight short brim or a folded over brim. But yeah, I really like the shape of this hat and I really like the look of the cables. And so I think it would be a great hat for late fall and early winter. And the last pattern I want to talk about is the Tree Planter Toque by Erin Tolley. This is your super classic ribbed toque, or as we call it in the States, like a beanie. This hat is, I think they recommend Malabrigo Rios or Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, but it's really like any worsted weight yarn will do. I think it's really a really great sort of classic shaped hat. I think what's nice about a hat like this is you can knit it a little bit longer if you want a folded brim, but they also look really nice if you just do like a single layer. So depending kind of on what your taste is, you can modify the pattern a little bit to suit your needs. This is also a free pattern, which is really nice. And so, yeah, I think it would be a great addition to any fall or winter wardrobe. All right. So now that I've kind of shown you what my inspiration patterns were, I'm going to go ahead and talk about what my actual knitting plans are for the fall. So I've picked one pattern from each of the categories that I have discussed. So the first pattern we talked about was textured sweaters, and I have decided that I'm going to make the Chinook Winds pattern. I've been thinking about that sweater for like a year. So I just was like, I would be disappointed if I went through like another season without at least like taking a stab at it. I do not knit a lot of lace, so it definitely will be a bit of a challenge for me, and I'll have to be very focused when I work on it. But I did make a swatch. Let's see how to do this. So yeah, so it came out really nice. I think this lace motif is going to be really cute. The yarn that I'm using is Cascade Yarns Eco Plus Hemp. That is a 80% Peruvian Highland wool and 20% hemp yarn. It is a 2-ply, which I think will be very nice for the lace motifs. And yeah, I'm really excited to get started on it. I think it will be a really nice piece to wear this fall. I am excited to have a piece that has fringe on it. That'll be cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Oh, and the color that I'm using is 03. You know, 03, a classic color. So yeah, that is going to be the textured or pullover sweater that I make this fall. The next sweater, the cardigan, the oversized cardigan I want to make. I was actually thinking about making the Frankie cardigan, but as far as I could tell, the only way that I could get access to that pattern would be to actually purchase the yarn through Sandnes Garn. And as I said at the beginning, I really want to focus on using up some of my stash this fall. And so the Frankie cardigan will have to wait until a time when I want to make that kind of purchase. So I decided instead that I'm going to go ahead and make the Champagne cardigan by Petite Knit. So I believe the pattern calls for, I think I said this earlier, a DK weight and a lace weight mohair to create a worsted weight. I'm actually going to be using more of like a fingering weight. So this is, oh boy, backwards, there we go. Chester Farms Pride of the Flock. This is a single ply yarn made of 100% wool. The color is Spice Heather. I got this there was a town yard sale, and a lovely woman was selling a bunch of her yarn stash. And so I got it there, and yeah, I'm so happy to have it. I'm going to pair it with this Mayflower Super Silk in the colorway 98. Again, just a classic color. But yeah, I think they look really nice together. These kind of like lovely light browns and beiges. And I did do a swatch because, like I said, I am using a lighter yarn. So I got gauge by using a size 8 needle. And, you know, it's definitely probably not as thick or as tight as maybe if you used the correct gauge, but I do think that's kind of nice for fall. I think it'll have a really lovely drape because of that change. And yeah, I'm happy with the fabric. So I'm gonna go ahead and move forward with the Champagne cardigan. I also think too using the mohair with this single ply will really help with the strength of it. I'm not sure. I believe single plies, especially like this, it feels like it might be prone to felting, which I'm a little concerned about. But I'm hoping using like this, the silk mohair will give it strength and also some like additional durability as I move forward with knitting it. So yeah, that is the champagne cardigan. The next item is a wrap. So I've decided I'm going to knit the Knit As You Are wrap. I really like, I'm in my chevron season. I'm full chevron core. I can't help it. But yeah, I just think it's so interesting. I think that really bold design will look nice, even kind of like wrapped around, and if folded up, and it looks really nice spread out. So the yarns that I'm going to use, I don't have the band on this, but this is just Cascade. There we go. Almost. Maybe not. There we go. This is Cascade sock, heritage sock, excuse me, just in the colorway black. And then this one here is SRT Yarns Donegal. The colorway, I believe, is just Virgen. It is a Spanish yarn. I had the luxury of going to Spain this summer, and in the town of Zaragoza, I went to a little yarn store and I purchased this lovely tweedy yarn. It is a 85% merino and 15% Donegal. And yeah, I just think these will look really nice together, create a really nice neutrally warm wrap to have for the fall. The next category is socks. I have decided I'm going to make the wild wool trail socks. I really love the pattern. I think they're really neat, and I am excited to wear them like hiking and things this fall. I'm just going to use another skein of Cascade Heritage sock, and this colorway is 9. I think it's just white, but yeah, it's a classic white, like white color from Cascade, and I'm going to pair it with this Cesium Yarns merino sock, which is 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon. The color name is Creator of Beauty. And yeah, I just think it's definitely like more of like a spring color, but I do think like these soft kind of color palette, this like lavendery kind of sweetness will look really nice with sort of the rugged kind of durable shape of the sock. I think that contrast will be something that's really interesting. Yeah, my dear friend got me this skein of yarn for my birthday, and I am so excited to use it. I'm not going to wait until it fits my color palette for the season. You know what I mean? So, and the final pattern I'm planning on knitting this fall is the weekend hat. So I really, really love the shape of this hat. I really love that cable motif. I just think it's a really nice shape, and I think it's going to be super nice to wear when I go get the mail and things like that. I already caked it up, but it is Harrisville Designs Highland in the color red, which is a nice, easy one to remember. But yeah, this is the color of the yarn. Yeah, it's a really nice, like, classic red color. I think it's, a lot of fall reds tend to be more like a poppy red or like a little more orange, and I think this is really like true red. Maybe it's got like a little bit cooler undertones. It looks a little brighter on camera than it does in person, It's, I think, a little more of like a winter red maybe than a fall red, but I think that's okay because I'm mostly going to be wearing it in the winter. And so it will be good to have it knit up once it starts to get cold. So yeah, so those are my knitting plans for the fall. I have a couple of weeks. No, I got like 1 week to get everything else off of the needles. Uh, that I don't have that much stuff. I've been just trying to clear stuff off, but I would like to have a totally fresh start. So on September 1st, I can cast on and make the most of that 3-month period. If you enjoyed watching this video, this is actually my very first video. So thank you so much for watching. And if you feel so inclined, if you liked it and you want to like or subscribe, I have a lot of really fun ideas for some knitting content I'd like to make in the future. So again, thank you so much for watching this. And until next time, wherever you are, happy knitting.